The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Quirky Dog Podcast, inspired by some of the quirkiest dogs you can ever imagine and the owners who love them. This podcast is brought to you by the quirky couple themselves, Scott and Jess Williams. Their aim is to educate and entertain. Here's Scott and Jess.
Welcome, guys, and here's Scott, Jess, and Jeremy this week. We are excited to have a special guest on the show from Boston Dog Lawyers, Jeremy Cohen. And first, we're going to start with the quirky tip of the day. The pig's all the way over here, so I got to handle it. Our quirky tip of the day today is if you are on the North Shore in Massachusetts and you have any legal issues as it relates to your dog, look up Jeremy. There's going to be a link in the description for where you can find him and a little bit more about his business. But this is an episode that we first found out about through the magazine Seacoast Bark. And Jeremy has just a very interesting job. He does a lot of different legal cases as it relates to your dogs. And we're excited to have you on the show. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks
you
for coming.
Thank you. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, the boys are smoking the new Garofalo cigar, too, so everybody's enjoying a little cigar buzz mid-Wednesday. So tell us a little bit about what you do and some of your most common cases.
And how you got into this in the beginning.
Sure. I got into it because a dog very close to home, my stepkid's dog that lived with their dad, got loose.
Okay.
And he was dog aggressive, but a woman tried to scoop up her little dog, protect it, and Jesse bit her in the ankle. And this was small town, Marblehead, Mass. They held a hearing. And I was a lawyer, so I said, yeah, I'll go. Mm-hmm. And I called ahead and the board. Anytime a dog bites, there can be a hearing in any city or town around the country, usually at night. It's fun. It's like a night game. I do enjoy it. For some reason, I enjoy it. But that night, I called ahead and the board said, don't worry about it. Nothing's going to happen. And when I went, within minutes, they wanted to euthanize Jesse. They said,
amazing.
They compared him to an Al-Qaeda terrorist cell laying in wait. There were no facts, and it was clear the loudest voices in the room were winning. So I started this firm to prevent that.
Okay.
Some dogs need to be put down, but there's so many things we can do beforehand. Trainers, behaviors, educate the owners better. And it made the local paper, some cartoons, and we won. I had no idea what I was doing. I was giving quotes to the newspaper. I had no concept, but it took off. And so every year I'd handle a few. And then about 5 years ago, I said, let's do it. Let's see if we can get something going full time. And
awesome.
We have Boston Dog Lawyers.
Emotional topic, that's for sure.
Yeah, the dangerous dog hearings, Scott has had to go speak at a few of them. But if there is a bite, the whole town gets involved and there's emotions on both sides. It's not easy. So you deal with a lot of those, and then you deal with some custody cases as well, right?
Right. Divorcing people who need this carved out, the dog, cat, horse. But a lot of times it's younger people who live together, decided to get a pet together, and then they split up and who gets to keep it. And those are they're battles, those cases.
I can imagine.
It doesn't, most
you
courts...
can keep the kids, I want the dog.
It's so much that. And we do create some joint ones. Yeah. Some joint custody sharing agreements. But it's not just about who bought the dog or who's the dog licensed under. There's so many, we call them indicia of ownership. Who cares for the dog? Who buys the food? Yeah. Who goes to the vet? Who knows how to raise dogs better? So every one of those cases has ended differently, but we usually have about a dozen custody cases at any one time.
That's crazy.
In court.
And how are people finding you these days? Just word of mouth, or?
Well, we just redid our website at bostondoglawyers.com, and we get podcasts. We were recently featured in Dogster and Catster magazine, which was big for us, but we get calls from all over the country. Yeah. So we have affiliated attorneys now in some states where just trying to be a resource for pet owners.
Nice. And how many people work for the Boston Dog Lawyers firm themselves?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I named it plural when there was just one of us because I had high hopes. So there's four of us now.
Okay, great.
And it's a 7-day-a-week job.
Yeah, that's crazy. So these custody cases, are they like drawn out over months? I mean, what kind of evidence do people bring? Like I know you talked about the factors, about financial factors and caretaker factors and everything else, but if someone's going to prepare for something like that, what types of things do they normally have to prepare with?
Good question. Receipts.
Okay.
Save your receipts.
Yeah.
And, vet records are helpful, except that there's usually a spot for only one person's name.
Yeah.
I don't care about who licensed the dog, because I could get the rabies certificate from you and license your dog in my town.
Yeah.
So that's not significant. I do want to see who paid, but we feel that there's a when. There's a when someone suddenly became the primary owner in a lot of these relationships. And so we look for that, and we try to educate the judge who... the judges are now taking these cases serious. We so appreciate that.
You have to. Animals are a huge thing these days.
And my firm, we do almost like a shock and awe early on to get us an early on court date so that we can get this in front of a judge. It's not the trial, but it's an early hearing to try to get some restrictions or get the dog back for somebody. And that usually gets everybody talking. Yeah. And we try to resolve it. But these are probably... they're the toughest cases, but they're the most fun, because when you get that dog back for somebody after they were bullied and told by their ex, you'll never see that dog again. You keep doing this, you're just going to end up crying and crying. And we are crying because we're so happy to get the dog back and to see the videos of that. Yeah. And the custody cases often involve, I've had mother, daughter, grandson, grandmother right now, aunt, niece. So I really try to talk them out of it.
Against each other?
Yeah.
That's tough.
I try to talk them out of it and try to work it out. But by the time they get to me, I'm confident that they've sought all the other
And when it ends
remedies.
in joint custody, what does that typically look like? Similar with kids, or?
Well, it ends up in a shared agreement with consequences if you don't deliver the pet back on time. And usually the people just don't want to see each other. So we find a neutral place where there's a drop-off and pickup, maybe a daycare that they pay one day a week and they don't have to see each other. And so far, those have worked. We did one of our early cases, which just gave us so much confidence, was a judge in Boston split custody of the dog between Boston and Seattle.
Wow.
And that was like... this,
we can do that, yeah.
We can do this.
I was thinking about that, crossing state lines and stuff like that. That's another issue.
Yeah, and because once you leave Mass, the judge doesn't have jurisdiction anymore. Right. So will you bring the dog back? If not, it gets complicated. We did just recently get a dog back from Montreal to Pennsylvania because it was stolen when the people lived in Massachusetts. But it's complicated.
Yeah, it is crazy because the dogs are so emotional, and I assume in a divorce, using that for leverage or any type of relationship conflict, using that for leverage is a huge thing.
Right. And that's what we look for. Like, what's the real reason that this person suddenly took the pet and won't give it back to you? Because usually it's not for love of the pet.
Yeah. Right. There's leverage or vendetta of some kind.
Some spite.
Yeah. One thing, a legal aspect that I ran into with a client where they were upset was they had their dog on a dog run in their yard because they didn't have a fenced yard. And the lady was walking down the street with her dog, and it pulled out of her hand, ran up into the dog's yard where the dog was on a tether, and those dogs got in a fight. She ran up into the property to get her dog back and got bit by the homeowner's dog, and the homeowner was liable for not protecting the public from her aggressive dog. That's how it went down, that she was at fault.
Not if I had the case.
And there wasn't anyone there to fight for her either.
That's what I'm so concerned about. Is I love helping the people that we do, but there's so many who don't know you can get help. And not just from my firm. We can refer you out or you can find other lawyers. But no, you lost control of your dog. Our person had the dog on a run, under control.
On private property.
On their own property. This happens too much, especially with, I'm seeing a lot of delivery cases now. They came on the property and they got bit. While they're invited onto the property, essentially, they're not invited to walk around back. They're not invited to go over and pet the dog.
And that's what they always do. Yeah. A lot of petting the dog. They don't know the dog.
Right.
But they're compelled. They go over and make friends with the dog that they have no business.
And as trainers, how good does a dog feel when it barks and the mailperson leaves, the mailman leaves? Because like, I just did my job. Yeah. Even though, they're going to leave anyway, the dog gets so confident that they did their job. And so I'm seeing more of that now. Also seeing a lot of nuisance cases where neighbors are complaining that the the dogs next door are barking so much it's interfering with their work because of COVID. People were home so much. Those are tricky because what really constitutes a nuisance? What's too much barking?
Yeah.
And I call upon animal control officers to intervene there, not to punish, but to try to
help define and
solve it somehow.
Right. And they don't. They don't. I just find that they're so limited in some of the things they'll do. But I think that's a fundamental being an animal control officer is trying to neutralize things before it gets to a hearing or you need a lawyer.
And quite often when they do come, the dog isn't barking.
Right.
So they're like, well, there's no barking going on. And yet the people are complaining over stuff that isn't really nuisance barking. They just don't want to hear any barking.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a different issue.
Right.
Yeah, tensions during the pandemic went up in general, so I guess it's a good way to outlet your stress. The neighbor's dog is causing trouble. Before we started, you mentioned vets. What's going on with that type of situation, just so I'm more clear what you meant there?
Well, we believe we can change vets' behavior by holding them accountable. So it's too often we get a call a day about vet killed my dog, and 80% of them, it's not true, maybe even higher. And what we do is we say, we'll get the records. We've built a bank of about 30 veterinarians around the country because it's really hard to get a vet who will give an opinion about another vet's work.
Yeah.
Right.
And we have the records reviewed. Did the vet meet the minimum standard of care? And if they did, great. Now the pet owner feels like, okay, I don't have to direct my attention at the vet anymore, because too often the vets just turn their back when there's a grievance because their insurance companies tell them. So people
they're
feel
afraid
like
they're going to incriminate themselves somehow by even talking about it. Maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what I have found, and I have given talks to vets, I have found that if they just talk to them, the calls would never come to me. People would go away, but they feel like I just plunked down $6,000. I brought in a dog to be neutered. Now my dog's dead and you're not talking to me. I need answers. So we're really trying one at a time to change that but there also is a perception that vets upcharge and things that you don't really need. And amazingly, this bank of veterinarians that I have, they believe that too. Yeah. So I know lawyers have a tough reputation, and but I'm doing what I can to actually eliminate the besmirching of vets online. If we can just get records reviewed and have a real opinion about did they do something wrong or not.
And that's true. The upcharging stuff, we see it all the time with clients. All of a sudden, you bring them in for something, and it's $1,500 procedure when maybe it didn't have to be. So, and when something happens, it is emotional. But like you said, just those open lines of communication are hugely important because people just need to be feeling like, there's no one at fault.
And here, one of the tips: if your dog is going in for surgery, the time when it's likely they're going to have a problem is post-surgery. Does your vet facility, do they keep people there overnight? Some places they leave at 11, come back at 7. If something happens during those 8 hours, no one's there. Yeah. And a lot of dogs, they aspirate, and aspirational pneumonia, their lungs fill with just as they're coming out of anesthesia, they might vomit.
Inhale something,
Yeah. And if someone was right there watching them, now, if they got a Pepsid AC beforehand, if they got a shot of Serenia, which prevents nausea, these little things
could have prevented it.
Yeah. So those are things that as a pet owner, it's been great to learn as I've gone through this business, but everybody should know that.
Yeah, be conscientious.
And people have asked that with us too, when we were boarding, is there someone there overnight to make sure if there was, God forbid, a fire? Is there someone going to be there to get my dog out? And one of the reasons that we had so much success is that we always had a person at the facility overnight. There was a bedroom built into our dog training place. And it put people at ease. It really helped a lot.
That's a great point. We're dealing with a few boarding facilities now. Yep. In one of the cases, my client was very eloquent, and we now have what's called Ollie's Law, trying to get that passed in Massachusetts because we thought boarding facilities were licensed. Yeah, they have no requirements in Massachusetts at least, of staff, training, and a fire emergency plan. And dogs got in a fight. There was only one staff member, and they didn't have any tools on how to break up a dog fight. So you got to check on your places. Do they have?
You need protocols.
One simple thing: a CO2 fire extinguisher. That can prevent so much because it's clean. It it's safe. It just evaporates, but it's enough of a shock to the dogs to get them to stop doing what they're doing and buy the person a few seconds to
So you could
grab
carry
them
one
up.
of those on your back when you're walking your dog, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Who needs bear mace when you have a CO2 fire extinguisher?
And then if you have to see a fire, you're a hero.
Well, the nice thing about that, really, to break up a fight, is that a lot of times people do carry mace, but their own dog gets maced. You know, it blows back in their face. It's all over everything, and it's pepper spray. You know, so it's not a pleasant thing.
Yeah. All right. We are going to go to break super quick. When we get back, we are going to talk a little bit about legality and rescue.
Does your dog seem anxious? Would you like your dog to relax? Do you want to feel more in control? Would you like your dog to cooperate? HowToCalmYourCanine.com. That's HowToCalmYourCanine.com.
All right, we are back. We are going to talk a little bit about rescue here, but first, I want to know: are there any breed trends as it relates to like these dangerous dog hearings that you might see,
or even legislation?
or even the veterinary stuff? Like, do you see certain breeds, like maybe an English bulldog, more frequently is one of the vet cases? Do you see any trends like that?
See, it's great to be interviewed by dog people because you know the questions.
We know what's going on. Yeah.
There's nothing worse than somebody who interviews me and they don't have a dog, so they don't know that question. Brachycephalic dogs are the number one problem at veterinary facilities because sometimes some major facilities think every one of those dogs should have airway surgery, and sometimes they're in for another surgery, and it's too much to do airway surgery and another surgery, and that leads to problems. And really, not every one of those dogs needs airway surgery, but you need a vet who knows that breed. This hits close to home when I get calls about golden retrievers because I have a golden.
Boy, those dogs really suck, don't they?
So unfriendly, just so unfriendly. With vets, you do want to make sure they know the breed because some breeds have very unique anatomy, and the smaller the dog, just the more complicated it is. And that's when I see a lot of issues with dental procedures on smaller dogs, Pomeranians, Yorkies, because you don't know what's going on until you anesthetize them and go in their mouth. But when you start putting tools in their mouth, I see so many injuries come out, to the eyes, to the back of the eyes, and to the nasal cavity because it's just so small in there.
Yeah.
And these are risks, but you need to know about the risks. Is your vet telling you those risks?
And there are some breeds that can't handle anesthetic as well as others.
Right.
Yeah.
They need certain types of anesthetic and all kinds of side effects.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And anytime your dog goes for surgery, there should be a pre-surgical blood work to make sure that the dog can process the anesthesia.
Yeah.
These are just things that, as a pet owner, I had no idea about, but I've learned through the cases.
And that's not necessarily an upcharge. That's trying to take care of your dog.
Yeah, that should be a commonplace practice, just like a boarding facility, somebody being there overnight, all of those little things. What about the dangerous dog hearings? Do you see any? Sorry, did you have another thing
No,
to
I was
say?
going to get to that.
Okay.
Of course, pit bulls are a part of that.
Yeah.
When someone calls me, I very rarely will ask the breed because to me, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And amazingly, I have had some golden retrievers. You get Huskies. Most people will say that their dog is a mix.
Yeah.
So a mix means I know exactly what kind of dog it is. But and you never bring the dog to the hearing.
Yeah.
People often ask, should I just bring the dog to the hearing?
No.
Nothing good can come from that.
Last thing we need is a bite at the hearing.
And what we do is part of our team is we bring in expert trainers and behaviorists for each case to try to educate the hearing authority. So if we'll bring in an expert on a pit bull. If it's a golden, we'll get somebody who focuses on that. And because it's important to me that we are the smartest people in the room, somebody on my team when it comes to talking about dog behavior at a dangerous dog hearing. Nobody from the neighborhood, nobody at the board, and even me, none of us should be heard about trying to interpret the dog's behavior and whether it should be put down. We need smart people. And oftentimes the town leans on the animal control officer, but when you cross-examine them, you find out they have no training in dog behavior.
Right.
But they just happen to be, their
authority
expert.
there. Yeah.
Sometimes it's a volunteer position. They're not even getting paid.
Right.
Yeah.
They do a lot of work, often handle multiple towns for just not a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I know it's a tough position.
And it is a serious decision to euthanize a dog. I mean, that is a life-changing decision. So it is important to have correct representation. Scott wanted to get into the rescue stuff. What do you want to talk about with that, babe?
Well, I just wanted to ask if you were running into any of what we are seeing more and more is the no-kill shelters that mean well, rescuing dogs from quite often the South, bringing them up. They don't have a lot of history on these dogs. And people are adopting them off a picture off of an internet. Just, that's it. That's all I got is a picture, and it says, loves everything, the best dog in the world, needs a home.
Sparky's
we can't
great.
believe this dog doesn't have a home yet. And they're like, and they get the dog, and either the dog has extreme anxiety, it's very destructive, it can't be in a crate, and they're having all kinds of problems, or the dog is getting aggressive towards other dogs, kids, all this kind of stuff. And then when they call back, they're told, well, we're going to put the dog down if you give the dog back. And then they're feeling like they don't want the dog to be put down sometimes. They feel like they have some kind of bond with the dog, but there's all kinds of weird stuff going on there,
So the problem you first identified, no-kill shelters, by doing that to themselves, now they're in the newspaper the minute they have a behavioral problem and the dog needs to be put down. Mm-hmm. And some of those no-kill, as it doesn't have to be 100%. They need behaviorists, and we've worked with rescues and with the Mass Department of Agriculture. They need behaviorists on board who will come and examine these dogs. Also, they need to be held more accountable because certainly most of them have insurance, but when you read the contract as an adopter, you see you've waived all rights.
As soon as you take possession of the dog, yeah.
But then you're told, oh, by the way, if you ever want to get rid of the dog, bring it back to us. So my question is, well, do you own the dog or not? Or if they tell you eat or feed this type of food or certain things.
Or train this type of way.
Yeah.
I see that a lot.
So then I feel like they haven't sold or adopted out. It's almost like a lease almost, so they're involved.
Yeah.
And when they're involved, they walk away from responsibility often, but not the rescues I work with. I have a few clients, but it's tough for the dog owner. I've had cases where they bring a dog home and all 3 children get bit.
Yeah.
Well, you knew I had children. I told you I had children. And then they're like, well, something must have happened. It's not right. And that is having a ticking time bomb because there's procedures in place, but not for behavior issues. More states are concerned about disease.
Yeah.
Right.
Rabies,
They come home with
I've
rabies.
seen that going back before the rescues, and I was really involved with protection dogs early on in my dog training career. And I knew several people that imported dogs and sold dogs for people that wanted, they had everything in the world and they wanted a protection dog on top, like icing on the cake, Right. And they'd pay a ton of money for these dogs. And it's kind of hard to get everything in one dog. A happy social dog that's going to also take someone down. Right. And they have to discriminate who they should be biting, who they shouldn't be, all kinds of stuff. And quite often, the wrong people are getting bit with those dogs.
We have a case on the Vineyard right now where rescue posted about a dog coming up from Florida. The woman said, I'll take it. She paid the money. And we have rules about isolating the dog when it first comes in. Well, the rescue said, you know what? It's at night. Why don't you just take the dog? And the vet paperwork, it talked about spay and neuter, and it just spay, and it had a question mark. It turns out that the dog needed emergency surgery that cost $6,000, part of which included a spay. Mm-hmm. And the rescue's like, don't look at us. She's like, I just got the dog, and you signed off everything. You never even isolated the dog. Well, we'll give you $100. So that's when I get involved. Yeah. That's just not right. That's one of these dumps where they just have walked away from it. They feel that they did good. They got the dog to the person.
Yeah, they passed the problem.
Yeah, and they're not all like that for sure. No, I mean, we've talked with some great rescues that are really responsible. We've had a rescue that hired me to do some evaluation and training. They're very responsible and trying to do the right thing. So they're not all just bringing up van loads of dogs and then handing them out to people and taking money and walking away from it. But more and more dogs are coming up, and it's getting looser and looser, I think.
And I have to remember that, right, it doesn't apply to all rescues. By the time a case gets to me, nobody calls and says, I got to tell you about a great rescue. So I only hear the worst.
Yeah, it's same as us.
Yeah, people don't call me and say, I have a great dog and I want to pay a lot of money for training. When can we get started? It just doesn't happen.
And then I have a question. I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, but a lot of times the rescues We'll talk about how if the owner that surrendered the dog didn't disclose all the information, that owner, if they do disclose the information of maybe aggression or whatever else, that owner that surrendered the dog can be at fault. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I know what my position is on it.
Okay.
I mean, I'm a lawyer. I have to have an answer for every question, but
That's why you're here. We'll take it.
So I think the answer is grayish, but that's why the world needs lawyers, because there's no black and white. But if you fully disclose, and I tell my clients this when they surrender just to a private individual, fully disclose what you know about the dog, all the records. If this dog's been in front of a dangerous dog hearing, any bite, you got to tell them. Then it's with knowledge. So I'm okay with that. I feel like you've done your job. It's when they find out, and a good lawyer on the other side will dig and investigate and finds out you knew and didn't share that. And that's kind of with all of our rules about negligence. You know, if you knew something existed, a hole in the parking lot, and you did nothing about it. So if you knew this dog has a tendency to bite and you didn't tell us.
Yeah,
So
that's true. If the dog had a
course.
10-day quarantine from a bite before and it was on record, you dig and you find that out, and then there's negligence there. All right, let's talk crazy stories. Scott always likes to talk crazy stories. What are some standouts over the years?
Early on, a woman called. Animal control had just taken away her pet squirrel, and she had rehabilitated the squirrel because it was outside and it was limping. She spent a few weeks with it, and she called animal control to say, "Look at me, look what I did." They're like, "That's a wild animal. You can't have it. We'll be right there."
Oh God!
And they came to get it, and she wouldn't let them in. So they got a warrant. And the lesson for anybody is if
SWAT team came in.
I have a case like that too. But if the cops show up with a warrant, you should let them in. She didn't, so they kicked in the door. They kicked in the door and they searched for the squirrel, which she had hidden in the closet. And
In the microwave.
I said, "Well, does the squirrel have a name?" No. She said, every morning I walk over to him and I say, "Morning, squirrel." And he tips his ears. I got a great one a year and a half ago, which I actually took. A woman called a lawyer to say her wild turkey was just taken by the police. I said, "Well, right there, you're not supposed to have a turkey." and I wouldn't do this in my first year, but I have a little bit more. I'm always concerned about credibility. So let me make a call. And I called somebody I know in the Department of Agriculture. He said, "Well, that's not for animal control to take. That's a state issue." And this turkey had come to her on the very day that her dog died. And they named it the same name as the dog.
Boy.
And the turkey lived in their yard for a month.
Like a reincarnated.
That's her.
Played tennis ball with the people.
But unfortunately, it pecked a kid in the face.
Oh, boy.
Who was teasing it.
It's like a dangerous turkey hearing now. You got to go to a whole new realm.
Boston turkey lawyer. So I made a call. And wouldn't you know it, she called me to say, "Thank you. Here comes a police car, and the turkey is in the back seat, and they brought the turkey home and put it back in the yard." And
I hope it was near Thanksgiving. It's such a good feel-good story.
I don't know what happened after that, but for that moment, I was her hero.
Yeah, that was a win. So you really deal with a lot of species then, not just dogs necessarily.
Yeah, I
Try not to.
I try not to. I try to limit it to pets, but in that instance, that's gold. A story like that. I took it so I could sit here and tell that story one day.
Let me share another question I have. I got a call from a lady that said, "I have a wolf hybrid that got out of the yard, and I can't remember what happened. If there was a bite, there was an incident with this dog." And I'm like, shoot, I don't really train wolves. And I know that wolf hybrids can be a really sketchy animal. They're not a domesticated dog. They're part wild, part dog, So I looked up the law. She was in New Hampshire before I even continued to follow up. And it said, if you can have a wolf hybrid as long as we know where it came from to your house and it's fenced properly. There's extra rules if you're going to have a wolf hybrid. And they weren't doing any of the rules they were supposed to do. So they were really at fault,
Wolf hybrid. One of my most favorite cases was a wolf hybrid case. And it really takes a special person to have a wolf hybrid. And unlike New Hampshire and Mass, you can't have them. So people are always trying to find a way to bring them up here. This guy told me how great they are. I learned a ton about it. We got an expert involved. It was a criminal act having a wolf hybrid. It's against the law. And we won. The judge found that the statute was too vague. So when you looked at the statute and you have to look at the lineage, it said that any dog that has a wolf in its ancestry is a wolf hybrid. And the judge said, I have a dog.
Right.
Yeah.
That means that everybody's going to take my dog.
Yeah.
But in that case, and I don't do this so much anymore, the owner insisted I meet the wolf hybrids. And there, in the end, there was a documentary going on. So I feel this pressure that I've got to meet them. And I met the first one. He was great, Keanu. Then I met Luna. And they said, just hold her by the neck and just hold her down. Well, I think they set me up because suddenly she's growling. She keeps turning back to bite me. And I'm thinking, I can't believe the hearing's tomorrow.
Hold her down harder.
The hearing's tomorrow, and I'm going to show up with a dog bite. And so two guys came in and formed a wall, and they're like, okay, sneak out.
Get out. Oh, my gosh.
It was disappointing because she didn't clearly know who I was, and I was trying to save her. But it was a great video on tape that they cut, and I'm just like, you got to edit that out. We can't have that. But the case is far enough in the past that we don't have to worry about it.
Well, this is an important thing to realize because you don't really know if you're going to need your services or not because, these dangerous dog hearings, you need to be there for the hearing. It's not like you can go back 5 years later and renegotiate it. Same thing if you're in a relationship with a dog. I'm going to start saving receipts for our dogs just in case.
In my name.
No, but really, I mean, these are little intricacies that you don't consider when you own an animal. But with this legal aspect kind of on the rise, it's important to plan ahead and definitely save Jeremy's information for when stuff pops up.
The nice thing is I have a lot of clients that have dogs that have aggression issues, that the people have done a lot to keep them under control and whatnot. But it would be great for them to have your card in their back pocket because quite often, I don't know what the odds are, but probably half the time it's not even their fault because someone came in and got too forward with their dog and they had no business doing that, And they don't know until they talk to you. They may think immediately, I'm guilty, my dog's aggressive, but really, I mean, I'll tell you, I had a dog that bit someone 20 years ago, and I had him in the backyard in a fenced, contained area. It was triple fenced from the street, but I had a pool guy that would come in and take care of the pool. So he comes in through the one fence, and then he's in the backyard, which there's no way any dog can get to him. But then he sees my dog barking, so he goes and he sticks his hand in through the friggin' gate, and the dog bites him. He didn't report it, but the next week he came in, he goes, oh, your dog bit me. I said, how is that possible? Right. I got this dog triple fenced. Right. He goes, well, it was my fault. I stuck my hand in there. Now, he never filed a complaint or anything, but protecting your dog from the idiocy of the public is really tough.
And you'll hear from other lawyers on the plaintiff side who pursue the damages. It's strict liability. You're always at fault. No, you're not.
Yeah,
there's so many facts to uncover. Dogs bite for a reason, as you both know, and a lot of times that reason doesn't come from them. It comes from the not always a victim, but you can see that the victim kind of
they're not reading the dog's behavior. The dog's fearful, and they just keep coming in. Right. And that's why kids get bit a lot because they're not reading the dog's behavior. They just come in and want to give the dog a hug.
And that's the parents' fault for not teaching kids how to interact with dogs. If they spend 10 minutes a year, even in school, here's how you approach a dog. Half of the 4 million bites a year are to kids 12 and under. Yeah. So that's preventable.
And I found out just recently because I have a client who is a nurse practitioner for a plastic surgeon. And she said quite a bit of what we do is dog bite reconstructive surgery with kids. Yep. And I said, what time of year is there any? Do you see a pattern? She says, always the holidays. Holidays, kids, and that's when dogs get bit. Kids get bit by dogs.
So much chaos at the house. The dogs aren't used to having all these family members.
No one's watching anybody. And protect
kids
your dog.
Kids are chasing the dog around, some 5-6-year-old kid, because they want to play.
Yeah.
The dog runs in the crate to get away from him. The kid goes right in the crate.
Folks are having some drinks, just relaxing, catching up with people they haven't seen.
Yeah, be an advocate for your dog. And if you do have an issue, know that you can get some representation. I think it's really a fascinating topic. And when we came across your article, Scott was like, oh my God, we got to get him on the podcast because not a lot of people in the country are doing this, but it seems like it is a little bit on the rise, like you said.
I think a lot of attorneys don't want to deal with it. It's like too small or whatever. They just, maybe it's just out of their wheelhouse completely and they just don't want to.
Maybe if you didn't have the personal investment, you wouldn't have gotten involved, frankly.
And I love that. I love that other people or other lawyers like, what?
What do you do?
What? And then when we go against each other, they're like, oh, okay, now I see. Or my 30-second speech about why you would need a dog lawyer. I mean, even my own parents took 5 years till they fully understand why you would need a dog lawyer.
Yeah.
Right.
So I get it, but hopefully there'll be more around soon.
All right. Well, if
I'm going to get a wolf pit bull hybrid.
You're all set.
We're going to start having a lot of kids, and then we're just going to call Jeremy when things hit the fan. All right. If you guys need to find Jeremy, we are going to link his business URL in the description. You have a Facebook page as well, correct?
Yes, we do. Boston Dog Lawyers.
All right. Check it out. Massachusetts mostly, but it sounds like you're consulting various places, right?
We do have a lot of opportunity in New Hampshire. A lot of pet owners need help.
All right, great. Thank you so much for joining us. The boys are going to finish their cigar. You guys have a great week, and keep it quirky.
Thank you.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.